City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Gallagher plan of the Bunurong. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold the continuing relationship to this land. So everyone, welcome. We are in a hybrid style of meeting tonight with councillors, officers and members of the public in the town hall, albeit under our strict conditions. Some officers and members of the community will continue to participate virtually via the WebEx platform. This meeting is being streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Streams and recordings of council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced or republished without permission of the council. Now, whilst we operate in this online mode, there always remains the risk of technical issues arising that are beyond our control, and if that happens and we experience difficulties, we will adjourn the meeting while we adjust and take the time to resolve the issue. So let's get started with councillors. Number one is apologies. Do we have any apologies? Councillor Baxter?
Yes, Councillor Consultative is an apology.
Do I have a second for that apology? Do I need one? Yes. All right, so Councillor Consultative is an apology for this meeting. Thank you. Let's move on to the minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the previous meeting, the 17th of March 2021, have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? If not, can I have a mover, Councillor Baxter? Thank you. And do I have a seconder for the minutes, Councillor Bond? I will now put the motion. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in the matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? There are none. We'll move on to item number 4, which is public question time and submissions. So we will hear all the public questions and public comment on report items. All requests to speak were required to be submitted by 4 p.m. this afternoon, and submitters were given the option to attend the meeting in person or join the WebEx meeting virtually. Also, they were offered the option of statements being read by an officer on behalf of them if they did not want to attend virtually or in person. So let's move on. I'm going to call upon our first speaker of the night, John Spearings, who is submitting a public question to the council. Is John here?
Yes.
You're virtually. Sorry, John. John, if you could state your name and suburb, and then you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is John Spearings. I live in Elwood. And I've submitted my question in writing as well. So if if I extend beyond the 3 minutes, you've still got the question. It relates to affordable housing, and I note that Council's housing strategy was launched in 2016 by the then Mayor Bernadine Voss. Since then, Council has committed to several important housing projects through the use of some land and some cash in partnership with the state government and local housing agencies. This has been a very considerable investment. The In Our Backyard strategy said that over the next 10 years, the City of Port Phillip aims to reverse the decline in the proportion of affordable housing in the city, to cater to emerging housing needs, and ensure the provision of affordable housing becomes a component of private development. Through direct investment of $30 million of council property assets and supporting cash contributions that hope to achieve these goals. Council also promised to work with the Victorian Government to identify opportunities to increase the yield from existing public housing sites, to facilitate the Housing First or the PPHA, to identify existing housing trust assets that could be redeveloped to increase their housing yield, to identify opportunities for affordable housing planning mechanisms that could be delivered, including at Fisherman's Bend. The Victorian Government recently committed to a groundbreaking $5.3 billion investment in social housing over the next 4 years, nearly all of this through partnerships with the social and private sectors and local government. So my question is, since the state government announcement, has Council commenced discussions with the government to take advantage of this specific opportunity and to leverage council property assets for social housing as promised in the strategy over the remaining 4 years, in addition to the existing Marlborough Street and Wellington Street Common Ground projects. How many properties have been identified as suitable for this purpose, understanding that $30 million in cash and properties were identified in 2016? And what is the potential housing yield of these properties? Is Council pursuing other elements mentioned above, such as increasing the yield from existing public housing sites, PPHT assets, and the delivery of more affordable housing at Fisherman's Bend? Thank you.
Thank you, John. I believe Tony Keenan will respond.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, as Mr Spearing's identified, the Council has in our backyard in place with a number of aims around improving social and affordable housing in the city. In relation to specific questions, Council is working with the Victorian Government to identify and facilitate opportunities to improve and increase the yield from public housing sites. The Mayor, the CEO and officers met with Minister Richard Wynne, the Minister for Housing, last week and had positive discussions around that. Ultimately, that will be the decision of the state government through their own budget processes, but we would be hopeful that there will be opportunities to improve and increase the yield of existing public housing. Council of City of Port Phillip is very happy to work with Housing First to facilitate the redevelopment of their assets and would work with Housing First if they propose any new projects along those lines. We're very proud of the work that we've done to date in pursuing and advocating for affordable housing planning mechanisms, and have done a range of things advocating with and working with the Victorian Government. Some of the outcomes of this: we achieved permits for 65 units of community housing at Fisherman's Bend, negotiated under voluntary planning agreements there, and we're continuing to negotiate agreements with the private developers. We've done a range of advocacy in relation to a mandatory planning mechanism such as inclusionary zoning, including submissions to the Ministerial Advisory Committee for Planning Mechanisms. And again, we raised this with Minister Wynne when we met with him last week. And we work with the Fisherman's Bend Task Force, the City of Melbourne and the government departments to develop affordable housing guidelines. In relation to delivering of community housing assets on council land, there was a report last year on the 2nd of December which assessed a range of council property assets in the council's property portfolio to determine when either of them can be delivered. All of the sites, it was concluded, were not immediately suitable for a range of reasons, such as excessive loss of car parking, the project delivery being too complex, too long, or not being able to deliver a viable, a cost-effective option. We will continue to review those, and there will be opportunities to continue to explore what council assets can be provided, and that would be determined through business cases to the council.
Thank you, Mr Keenan. I now call upon Michael Sabata, who is speaking to item 7.2, which is the petition to retain the bee garden at Ludwig Stamer Reserve. If you could please state your name and suburb, and then you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Hello, Michael Sabata, resident of Cobden Street in South Melbourne. Just want to preface this with, once again, the council's interface on the website, it wasn't possible to submit public a request to speak to council. I had to ring up. It's a bit of a deterrent when every time you try to use it, that interface doesn't work. Anyway, onto the petition that myself, on behalf of residents in South Melbourne, Cobden Street, Napier Street and Raglan Street in South Melbourne, Half a dozen of us got together when we heard that this tiny bit of land that has a little garden bed on it in Stamer Reserve was to be removed. It's one of these small issues. It's a small neighbourhood issue, and I would have to say I wish I weren't here to have to present this, but I drew the short straw amongst the residents. We got 64 signatures. It was an easy effort. We could have got many more, I'd like the council to point out. And so one of the things that this is not an argument about or a petition about nature strips, because it is on a reserve. Of course, that reserve is council land. You have the right to direct how it's used. It's not about the resident who planted it. She didn't ask for us to do this. It's about the residents of this little pocket of South Melbourne saw this little addition to the streetscape that's in the reserve and asked that it be kept. And it's as simple as that. It's about listening to residents. Now, there's an purported issue about the safety of this. And if you go and look at it, it's pretty hard to argue that it's really a trip hazard. And even that perception of a trip hazard could be addressed very simply. And I think that's pretty much all that needs to be put to you. It's a very simple issue. It's a very local issue. But there's a lot of residents who live in this area. We all use that street and don't see that there's an issue there that demands this be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savada. I now call upon Georgina Salidas, speaking to item 9.1, the Multicultural Advisory Committee Annual Report 2020. If you could please state your name and suburb and then take your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Georgina Salidas, Elwood. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm actually very proud to be presenting the first annual report of the Multicultural Advisory Committee, and I'd like to thank Councillor Oggy Simic and Laura Catapan for their work in establishing the committee. And I'd also like to thank Eva Zvisk for her ongoing commitment to the committee. I want to acknowledge my colleagues on MAC and thank them for their insights. It's clearly a new committee, and I think we're very lucky to have the membership that we do have on that committee. We're tasked with providing advice on issues that affect multicultural communities, refugees or asylum seekers. The committee's composition reflects the cultural and religious diversity of the city of Port Phillip, as well as various migration and settlement experiences, as well as different age groups and so on. The committee held its first meeting in December 2019, and about 2 meetings later, COVID happened. So our first year has been an absolute trial by fire. COVID placed a range of immediate issues on our agenda. This experience, whilst difficult, has illustrated the value of the Multicultural Advisory Committee. Through our members, we were able to immediately recognise community needs, and as a result, the organisations that support international students and asylum seekers were linked through a Share the Food project. Key COVID fact sheets were translated into Russian, Polish and Hebrew. A food delivery service for international students and temporary visa holders was established. Funding was used to support digital literacy for multicultural seniors and families residing in Park Towers and Emerald Hill Court. Tools for reporting racism were included on the council website. Working Victoria positions were established, and these were used to develop a local services directory for new residents and deliver COVID community information sessions to new residents. We also initiated a women's circle at Park Towers to challenge social isolation that's been the result of COVID. COVID increased anti-Semitism and anti-Chinese sentiments within the community, and as a result, the committee suggested to Council that it joins the All One Together campaign, and I'm proud to say that we are now one of that campaign's ambassadors. Other anti-racism initiatives considered included the strengthening multicultural life-saving programs, work with local sporting clubs to make them more inclusive, review employment policies for biases in recruitment, establish a multicultural communication plan, advise the Council on joining Welcoming Cities, a national framework, and advise the Council to develop a multicultural statement of commitment. COVID has increased the isolation for older persons from minorities, and within Fort Phillip there are over 30 such groups that cater for multicultural seniors. These groups ceased to exist during COVID. We really realised how valuable they were when the seniors were reporting increased isolation. Many are not digitally literate. A positive ageing officer has been funded by the Commonwealth, and this person will be with us till June 2022, and they're tasked with supporting these groups to remain operational. In 2020, we weren't able to continue business as usual as far as Cultural Diversity Week and Refugee Week, as these had to be cancelled, but we managed to mark the occasions by running online storyline sessions with Port Phillip Library. A number of our members actually did these in languages other than English as well. We also co-curated a photo exhibition with the Jewish Museum about the refugee experience of the Jewish community, and we've also instigated a program where different people are videoed discussing their migration experiences, and these are online.
Ms. Salinas, you will have to come to the end,
okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm just going to list a few of the consultations that we were involved in, because that's obviously one of our major tasks. We were consulted on the budget, public space strategy, Shrine to Sea project, vulnerable persons mapping, customer service charter, multicultural senior groups review, community engagement and health and wellbeing. And I'd just like to finish by saying that while 2020 has been very, very difficult, particularly for a first-year committee, it's actually proved very successful in bridging the council with minority communities towards a more cohesive Port Phillip. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon Frida Ehrlich to speak to item 9.2, Older Persons Consultative Committee Annual Report 2020. If you could state your name, suburb, and then please speak.
Yep, Frida Ehrlich, St Kilda. Thank you, everyone. I can't see you, but thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for the opportunity to speak to the 2020 OPCC Older Persons Consultative Committee Annual Report. Actually, 2020 was a bit of a year of loss for us, for our committee, and that's a bit of an understatement, because we actually had to go through the death of two committee members, Alex New and Leslie Grieg. I'm sure that the councillors who were here in 2020 were familiar with those very active, intelligent and engaging older citizens of Port Phillip. We also had the resignation by Dr. Jane Sims and by our former chairman, Josie Simsa. So they were also great losses. However, we still managed to achieve a lot, and some of the highlights included providing feedback on Council's draft customer service charter, the Council budget, actions relating to the reactivation of Fitzroy Street, and the need for public seating and toilets on the strip. And we did participate in the running of the Seniors Festival as well. Issues of concern raised to Council included better public lighting, the impact of COVID, lockdown on older residents, and the charging for the hiring of Council's community facilities. And these are issues that we're going to continue with in 2021. Now, I want to take this opportunity to remind councillors that the OPCC was formed in 2000, and we, as a formal standing committee, and of the 70-plus local government areas, there are only about 30 that have a structure like the OPCC, similar to ours. And that, in fact, we represent every resident that's 55 and over, and that is 20% of the population. So why I'm making these points is I think that you need to take advantage of us in terms of consulting on policies and issues that will affect older residents, and we will take, as much advantage as we can of the ability to comment and act on policies that we see important to older people. We want to make our older persons of this council visible and not invisible, and we want to represent them in council matters. This means probably primarily, Georgina mentioned racism, but I'm going to mention ageism. And, what that means is breaking it down. It might mean looking at council policies, looking at the way that community members are treated by council staff and by the community. There's a lot of actions that are being done and that can be done, and we really would like to participate in that. So, the World Health Organization says that actions that make communities better for older people actually benefit everyone. For example, in 2021, our priorities will include a focus on council services that keep frail older people living independently. Most importantly, we want to attend to issues of connectivity so that people who want to access council services and are concerned about issues in their lives, may I mention vaccinations, can turn to council as a resource and expect that council will be leading the way in telling them what to do, because so far, as we know, it's been, fiasco might be too strong a word, but we haven't heard much from council, we haven't heard much from our GPs, so people are left hanging, and especially people who can't access the web or the internet. So the other issues that we are going to work on this year are safety and comfort in outdoor spaces. We've already mentioned lighting. Now, it's important for older people to get out, to meet people, to do exercise. To that effect, we need smooth surfaces on our footpaths, we need comfortable seating, and we need lighting. And I don't need to tell you that this will benefit every bit of the community for safety and for visibility of older people, which is most important.
Ms. Ehrlich, I might have to...
Yep. It is my goal in 2021 that the OPC members will be appearing more in this council chamber or maybe upstairs so that you can hear our voice directly. Finally, I just want to thank Councillor Dick Gross, former Councillor Dick Gross, if he's listening, and welcome Councillor Peter Martin. And also thanks to the committee members and, of course, to Laura and Sheridan, who have been fantastic support and will continue to be. Thanks.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing more from your committee too. I now call on Jennifer Edge, who will be submitting a public question in person. Welcome, Jen. If you could state your name, suburb, and then please take your 3 minutes.
Jen Edge in Kilda. I just want to acknowledge the Boonwurrung past, present and emerging, and that they've never ceded this land. Thanks. Ta. Okay. I have been trying to get here for a long time, so I've got 5 questions. The first one is regarding to the City of Port Phillip Access Network funding and objectives, and particularly what their action responsibilities are to members like myself who have lacked ongoing service from that group for 2.5 years. The second question is relating to the City of Port Phillip communication avenues. Again, pre-COVID and during the COVID period, it's been very difficult for me because I rely on hard copy, and despite ongoing requests and agreements with Murray Chick, subsequently governance, and I've dealt with 12 staff, including councillors and the Mayor's PA, have not been able to provide me with access to information on any of the meetings that have occurred since October 2019. The third question is regarding the St Kilda drumming community, which unfortunately seems to be being subjected to unsolicited responses by police when not required. So I get down there as often as I'm capable to check on the group, which has been instrumental during the COVID time to including people who are disadvantaged and estranged and giving them a sense of community and encouraging them, even if they have no previous experience, to even shake something, just to feel like they're involved. I couldn't believe it. I went down there the other night by cab and police arrived from all directions. After I'd been there an hour and a half, there were 6 of us, so all the drums were packed up when I arrived, and we ended up having a little pizza party. Somebody went off and got 4 pizzas because there were homeless there sleeping on the beach who hadn't eaten. This is just a typical example of how St Kilda drumming incorporates everybody in the community, including the itinerant and the disadvantaged. And if I hadn't have caught a cab and had a receipt timing that taxi fare, the police would have continued to harangue the 6 of us. Just incredible when there are so many issues that police are not responding to in regards to safety in our community. Question number 4 is, again, through assist and various members of staff and councillors, I have asked since October 2019 for hard copy responses to the questions that I've asked that have been taken on notice. It would be really nice after all this time to have a response to any of those. And 5th, going back to before October 2018, I have been asking, and don't know why I don't receive updates, as to when the problem with the Rotary Children's Playground and the agreement with the Stokehouse, which caused the drummers, through the fact that the lighting was removed and the security fence was removed, to move around onto the concrete side of the foreshore area there. And it's very hard to get a horse back through a gate once it's bolted. So we have an agreement, as you recall, for them to be in the Rotary Children's Playground. How you're ever going to get them back in there is beyond me, because it's not been restored. The full lighting hasn't been restored. There's been ups and downs about bins being there and not being there, to the point where I've even had to go and address duty management of local hospitality businesses there and say, why are you taking the bins away from the public accessible concrete walkway into your restaurant to put your rubbish in there? And the response is, oh, well, we've had a function, so we've got more rubbish than we anticipated, and the bins will be emptied tomorrow and put back. In the meantime, people are dropping their litter from the skate park to the pier. So yes, what's happening in regards to the Rotary Children's Park? I understand you probably can't answer any or all of those 5 questions right now, but thank you for the opportunity and congratulations to the new incumbents. And I can't go without making one final comment. I want to compliment Frida on her presentation. Apparently, until tonight, I didn't know I'd been a constituent of the Older Persons Network for the last 7 years. And despite many efforts with Council, I continue to not receive information about things that may or may not either help me or, as a community development worker, enable me to inform others. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take all of those on notice. I now call upon Camillo De Luca speaking to item 15.1, notice of motion from Councillor Tim Baxter on the Australian Government intervention in the case of Julian Assange. I believe Camillo is
Camillo, you're
online.
Right.
Yep, great. Camillo, could you state your name and suburb, and then you've got 3 minutes to speak.
Yeah, hello, sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us, sir?
Okay, thank you to everyone. My name is Camillo De Luca. I'm from the official Australian Assange campaign. Let me start by saying most Australians are completely unaware of what is going on with Julian.
So can I just get you to state your suburb for the record and then get underway?
Reservoir in Melbourne is my suburb.
Please continue.
But I'm calling on behalf of the official Assange campaign, sorry. Let me start by saying Australians are completely unaware of what's going on with Julian. This is largely due to the lack of media coverage in Australia. Hundreds of international organisations are screaming out human rights abuse, but we never hear about it here because of that reason, and very few people are aware of the abusive process in his case. Let me say, without the support of Australia, Julian has no hope of getting justice. I would like to quote Professor Nils Melzer, who is the Human Rights Chair of Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. He is also the Professor of International Law at the University of Glasgow, and he is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, which is quite a list. He says, in 20 years of work with victims of war, violence and political persecution, I have never seen a group of democratic states ganging up to deliberately isolate, demonise and abuse a single individual for such a long time and with so little regard for human dignity and rule of law. Julian has not tried to hide or escape justice. He is represented by the highest and most esteemed loyal team. He's actually a journalist who's been fighting for his life and fighting to stay alive for 11 years for doing his job. The list of awards he has won is huge. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 9 times, including this year. He's won Australia's Walkley Award and the Peace Prize medal for exactly what the United States want to extradite him for. So I say, how can we give Julian the highest awards in Australia for journalism and then let America jail him for it? It's an insult to our institutions and our press freedom. He's not an American, and as far as I know, he's never been to the United States. Australians should be outraged by this. Not even a single war criminal has been prosecuted, and an Australian journalist is sitting in a prison instead. In January of this year, the English courts have already denied the US extradition request. However, Julian continues to be held without charge, pending a US appeal. According to Professor Melzer, the conditions of his detention do not comply with international laws and amount to psychological torture. Julian is a gentle person. He's detained in the most violent prison in England. Imagine yourself or any one of us trying to sleep in such a place. The impact on his psychological condition is life-threatening. He is now on 24-hour suicide watch. He is held 23.5 hours a day, 7 days a week, in solitary confinement, and this has been going on for 2 years. He hasn't seen a single visitor for 6 months, as far as I'm aware, due to the coronavirus lockdown. According to Doctors for Assange, a group which consists of over 220 doctor signatories, Julian's life is in real danger and he could die in prison. Since Darwin City Council first put forward a similar motion in 2019, hundreds of institutions around the world have joined the call, and that's including the City of Melbourne and other councils, and just this Monday the Blue Mountains City Council passed a similar motion. And most recently, Labor leader Anthony Albanese stated enough is enough, the government should act to end Julian's incarceration.
Camillo, you will have to come to the end of your 3 minutes. Sorry, sir.
Yes, I'm done. I employ all councillors tonight to join the call. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. I call upon Gaetano Greco, apologies if the pronunciation is incorrect, speaking to item 15.1, the notice of motion on the Australian government intervention in the case of Julian Assange. Are you with us, sir?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could state your name and suburb, and then you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, look, my name's Gaetano Greco, and also I'd just like to say that I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Darebin, and I thank the Councillor for Phillip for the opportunity to speak. Look, tonight I won't be speaking as a councillor or as a Deputy Mayor from Darebin. I'll be speaking in a personal capacity, but also I'm speaking on behalf of John Shipton, who is Julian's father. Unfortunately, he can't. He would have loved to have taken the opportunity to speak to the council tonight, but he has a prior engagement with ABC Radio, so he's not able to actually be online to speak. But he's asked me to pass on some reflections and for your council. Firstly, John Shipton is saying that he's very thankful for the council considering this notice of motion that has been moved by Councillor Tim Baxter, and he's really appreciative that yet another councillor is taking interest in the Julian Assange saga, and hopefully he's looking forward for the council's support. And John would also like to point out that a number of councils across Australia have supported Julian Assange's situation, and for John Shipton, the father of Julian, this has been really critical and really important because it's helped to actually mobilise momentum here in Australia around the cause that Julian Assange is facing. As mentioned also by Camillo, the City of Melbourne has passed a similar motion that you'll be considering tonight, and I won't go through the various points because I think they're quite self-explanatory, and also Camillo, the previous speaker, has sort of articulated the various issues. I'm sure all the councillors are fully aware of the plight of Julian Assange. So just on behalf of John, he's asking that council support the motion, basically to help bring Julian back home to Australia, to his family and friends, and that passing such a motion is critical, and that the momentum is building to a state where it's reached a very critical point of the campaign to free Julian, and because he's waiting his appeal, and that and more support that is gathered at the grassroots level, that is at the third tier of government, will be fundamental to maintaining that momentum and also putting that demand on the government to actually make some stronger representations to the UK in relation to releasing Julian Assange, and also representation to the US government. As we've seen, the opposition leader, Albanese, has come out and said enough is enough. So the momentum is there, and on behalf of John Shipton, I just wish that he wishes that the council support the motion, and so that because it'll be instrumental in helping to move the campaign along. And thank you very much for your time and consideration tonight.
Thank you very much. I call upon Walter Malado speaking to item 15.1, which is the notice of motion with the Australian Government intervention in the case of Julian Assange. Are you with us online, sir?
Yes, Walter Malado here, Australians for Assange, Melbourne, my suburb, my active suburb.
Oh, your second suburb, yes, and then you've got 3 minutes.
Sure. My actual suburb is Watonia North, but I'm speaking on behalf of Australians for Assange in Melbourne tonight. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Tim Baxter, for raising this very, very important motion in support of Julian, and which I'm confident will be passed this evening. I wholeheartedly support and agree with everything Camillo and Gaetano have covered off this evening. Julian was raised in Melbourne, had his formative years, and attended uni not too far from here in Carlton, and that's where he created the groundbreaking publishing and whistleblower site WikiLeaks, which I just want to highlight as really the platform that gave the people of the world, the people of Port Phillip, of Australia, people everywhere, gave them a platform in which they could securely and anonymously submit public interest information to be vetted exhaustively for possible publication without fear of repercussions or dangers to their own safety. And incidentally, to this day, there's been no evidence ever of anyone anywhere being harmed in any way because of WikiLeaks revelations, and they hold 100% accuracy record on everything they've published. So they're a pretty compelling operation. Julian's a multi-award winning journalist, a multiple Nobel Prize nominee, which the guys have covered up before, and he's also an Australian citizen. An Australian citizen who's been arbitrarily detained now for almost 10 years, the last 2 years of which he's been physically incarcerated in a maximum security prison in the UK without charge, effectively just on remand. Julian's a good man with incredibly honourable and selfless intentions. He's made the ultimate sacrifice and he's paying the ultimate price for trying to make the world a better place. That's his only crime, if any. Every poll I've ever seen over the years, public polls, overwhelmingly support Julian, as well as many petitions, one of which created by Phillip Adams, has garnered well over 500,000 signatures, 600,000 and growing, in support of Julian's freedom. So there's huge public support for Julian, for what he stands for and for what he's done. He hasn't broken any laws, which become abundantly clear to anyone who followed the extradition trial last year. Make no mistake, the outcome of his 10-year-long saga will impact every single person now and into the future. Upholding the sanctity of a truly free press and the people's fundamental right to know is paramount. We as Australians must stand up for a fellow Australian who sacrificed so much for the greater good, and yourselves as elected representatives of the people of Port Phillip have an opportunity to add your support along with the 8 other councils to pass similar motions. Incidentally, a database actually shows us that Port Phillip has the highest concentrations of supporters in Australia. Your support as community leaders will be invaluable in achieving a just outcome for any Australian citizen and for society in general. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you very much. I call upon David Blakely, speaking to item 15.1, which is the Australian Government intervention in the case of Julian Assange. David, are you online? We're not sure. No, so I will get Kirsty Pearce to read out his statement in regards to this matter.
Through you, Mayor, the statement submitted reads, no matter how noble a cause is the freeing of Julian Assange, I object to the allocation of council resources to this non-local government area of expertise, which fails to impact the residents of Port Phillip, especially given the current focus on the mistreatment of women by people in power. I feel it would be unwise for us to align with a person who has unproven allegations involving sexual misconduct. Instead of the above motion, I would like for previous motions tabled before the last council about community safety revisited. Both safety and perceived safety have a direct impact on residents, traders and the disadvantaged alike. A motion calling for the CEO to lobby state government for more police, mental health, outreach services would be more beneficial for locals than the motion tabled tonight. We're thankful of the work of local police and the City of Port Phillip local laws team in making our area safe for everyone. Yet with the better location of resources, more work could be done for better local outcomes, importantly inclusive of the disadvantaged.
We have received some further submissions to be read out on behalf of members of the public. So I'll call the name of each member of the public and refer to the Head of Governance to read a submission. Where? Sorry, bear with me. No. Is there another? Is there an updated one? There's an updated one. Don't worry about me, everyone. Okay, before we go to this point, I call upon Andrew Perkins speaking to item 15.2, the notice of motion by Councillor Katherine Copsey, Rainbow Local Government. Are you with us, Andrew?
I am.
Andrew, if you could stay.
Andrew Perkins, Albert Park.
Yep, please,
I'm a
you've
resident
got 3 minutes.
Yes, I know. Some people take a bit more than that. I'm a resident of a ratepayer of 24 years. I guess that might be in the order of $250,000 of rates. The proposed expenditure on LGBTQIA+, how many residents have we got of those type of people in our population? Can you tell me?
So it's just a time to make the statement. We can take the question on notice.
Well, how many residents? You must know how many of those classification are part of our residential base?
No, it's not data that we as a council would hold. And I don't have the census data on hand, so
okay.
We'll take the question on notice. So if you'd like to continue.
Yep. So you're spending. So we're proposed to spend $200,000 on getting the validation that the council is LGBTQIA+ compliant, are you?
The motion has actually changed slightly, but we are looking at a program. Actually, sir, we're going to take. This is your moment to make a statement. If you want to ask questions, you can put them on. I will take them on notice.
How much is that going to be? If it's
We're
not
going to
200,000?
actually get a report, sir. We
Yep.
don't know. This is just the
Okay.
start.
So the point really is that you've got a responsibility as the mayor and councillors and the CEO to spend the ratepayers' money in accordance with the ratepayers' requirements and needs, particularly after COVID, where you have, in your own words, a 13.5% reduction in budget and a 20 million excess deficit. So I would contend 200,000, 100,000 is just unaffordable. Nice concept, but unaffordable. And you must concentrate on core business. If you refuse to concentrate on core business, there'll be a lot of problems. It's actually you're spending the ratepayers' money in other than appropriate ways will lead to a lot of trouble.
Thank you. I'll now call on, now we're going to go to the statements being read out by the Head of Governance. So we have about 8 of those to come. So the first one is from Adrian Jackson. So Kirsty?
Through you, Mayor. And the first question from Adrian Jackson reads, will Council install durable and useful playground equipment in the Gasworks Park that everyone can use?
Anthony Trail, would you like to respond? It's on, they're automatically on, Anthony, so don't whisper anything under your breath.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Council will consult the community on a revised concept for Gasworks Arts Park later this year that aligns with the Victorian Government investigations into soil contamination at this site. The concept will include the provision of a new playground for community feedback and comply with our commitment to keep the park as an off-leash park in a native bush setting.
Thank you. We have another question from Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor. The second question reads, does Council inspect road and footpath repairs to ensure they are correctly done?
Chris Carroll will be joining us online to respond to this.
Thank you, Mayor. I can report that we do conduct inspections. We are reviewing our capacity to conduct more inspections across all our assets and reviewing the organisational structure to do that at the moment. But I will also take on note the 3 examples that Mr Jackson provided and specifically look into those as well.
Thank you. Another question from Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor. Mr Jackson submitted a third question relating to the 2022 St Kilda Festival. This question was previously answered at the meeting of 17 February 2021.
So now I call, this is to be read out, and read out for item 15.1, notice of motion on Australian government intervention in the case of Julian Assange, and this is from Jenny Roper.
Through you, Mayor, the submission reads, everyone is entitled to their opinion. This is an international issue and not a local council issue. A petition was tabled in December 2019 on a social amenity crisis in St Kilda with over 900 signatures from the community. Council accepted this petition asking the CEO to write to the Minister for Police and Emergency Services, Outreach Services and Alfred Mental Health to develop a policy around supporting rough sleepers who consistently choose not to accept help with homeless or access to mental health. No letter was written from the CEO. This is a local and current issue. We ask that it would be, if you could act on this current council local issue instead of contentious international issues.
Also a statement from Richard Ludlow.
And the statement reads, I am asking that Council absolutely not request the CEO or Mayor to write to the Prime Minister regarding this issue. This is a contentious international issue, not a local government issue, and is a waste of councillors and council officers' time. This is highlighted by the fact that a petition regarding community safety containing over 900 signatures was received and noted by Council, which still to this day has not been actioned by the CEO or Mayor. Council should concentrate on addressing local community issues and not the ideological international issues of political groups.
A statement by Scott Hayward.
In regards to this motion, can Councillor Baxter please explain why he is putting forward this motion and what it has to do with local council matters? Is Councillor Baxter copying other councils, including Yarra Council and Darebin Council? This does not relate directly to and has no direct benefits to local ratepayers.
Then on item 15.2, notice of motion, the Rainbow Local Government. This is a statement from Jason Rowder, sorry.
And the statement reads, I am a ratepayer and resident in St Kilda. The proposed motion is estimated to cost $200,000 and does not deliver a service for residents when council resources are scarce. You are proposing to buy an accreditation that is not necessary. Council has established its credentials in supporting the LGBTIQ+ community. The council donated land valued at $13 million for the construction of the Pride Centre and is a major sponsor of the Midsummer Pride Festival. Surely the council already provides diversity and inclusion training for its employees, and the council is safe and inclusive workplace for the LGBTIQ+ community. Why is this accreditation necessary? This is an inappropriate use of ratepayers' money and not what I expect my rates to be funding. If only such funds were put towards improving community safety, green waste bins, the increasing amounts of litter, removing tagging and much, much more. Many parts of Port Phillip are an eyesore. I ask councillors not to vote for this motion because it is unnecessary to spend more money, almost $250,000 on accreditation that does not benefit the community. Buying an accreditation logo is not a service. It does not help address the economic impacts on business from COVID. You could run at least 2 community festivals for that, which would have a much needed impact on economic recovery for businesses across Port Phillip. Please don't support this motion because it is wasting money, and you should focus the council's scarce resources on services that will help our community in Port Phillip.
One final statement from Sherelle Haywood.
And the statement reads, I have no issue with supporting all in the community. I feel council does well in this area, especially with LGBTQIT, and encourage productive paths of support. However, spending money employing more people, resources for an accreditation tick, in my opinion, is not the best way when council already has a shortfall of approximately $20 million in 1920. We have an extraordinary headcount number working in council, and I am sure that there are plenty of people employed at council who could take up this project without a $200,000 outlay. How does one salary and councillor time equate to $200,000? And as with everything, exactly what outcomes are we measuring?
That is the end of public question time and submissions. So we're going to move on to councillor question time. Councillors, are there any questions for officers? No? Great. Well, we'll move on to item 7, which is petitions and joint letters. And councillors, we have 2 petitions on tonight's agenda. So the first petition is 7.1, which is a petition regarding the bus route 606 from Dow Street and Esplanade, Westport, Melbourne. Are there any questions for the officers in relation to this report? Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just trying to find my questions from earlier on. I was just wondering, why was the bus route changed in the first place, and what has it accomplished?
I believe Brian T. can respond.
Through you, man. I thank you for the question. The bus route, the information that we have from PTV is that the bus route was changed from from going down Liard Street into Bay Street because of the difficulties that the bus drivers had getting across that Bay Street.
Any other questions for the officers or for Brian? If not, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Martin to move. Someone to second. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'm very familiar with the intersection of Liardett Street and Bay Street, and as Mr T has just mentioned to us, the alteration in the bus route is because of the major issues that occur at that intersection, and I look forward to council officers, when they provide their response, investigating the impact of that intersection on the bus route, and commend the motion.
Councillor Baxter? No. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin, would you like to close? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Moving on to 7.2, which is the petition to retain the bee garden at Ludwig Stamer Reserve. Councillors, are there any questions for officers in relation to this report? If there are none, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for this or something different? Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a second? Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the 60-odd residents of the City of Port Phillip that put this petition forward to us. This is probably the longest officer response I've read in several years in terms of in response to a petition, and the reason behind that is it's a complex issue, but one that the council needs to get its head around in terms of from a policy point of view. And it's encouraging to see that the council is reviewing its nature strip guidelines that will come back to councillors to review in the coming months. This particular group of gardens, and the report refers to 10 gardens, there's many, many more than 10 in the local area, have been a game changer for that local area in terms of social amenity, community amenity, and street amenity. So it's something that I think most councillors would be very supportive of. It's now time for council to catch up to what's already been happening in the local area to support, facilitate and do the right thing by everybody through an appropriate policy response. So thank you for the 64 petitioners that have put forward. It's not council's intention at all to not support these gardens, but they need to be done in a collaborative fashion, and I think it's been a lesson learned from council over the past couple of years about how we can do these type of projects better in this area and across the municipality. So again, thanks to the 60-odd people that put their petition forward this evening. We hear your concerns loudly, and I can't speak for all councillors, but I would hope here this evening that the majority of councillors wholeheartedly support these gardens and the wonderful people that have put them together. And also acknowledge that it does actually, the response does actually point out the leader of the pack and the original person that came up with this concept. So thank you for coming here this evening, Mr Sabata, and happy to move this motion, and hopefully councillors you'll support it also.
Councillor Bond. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Pearl? Therefore I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? That is passed unanimously. We'll move along to the presentation of reports. So the first report is 9.1, which is the Multicultural Advisory Committee Annual Report 2020. Councillors, do we have any questions of the officers of this report? No questions? Well then, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Baxter. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to acknowledge and thank the Multicultural Advisory Committee. As stated, they've done some good work in some trying circumstances, as have we all, haven't we, I suppose? But certainly as a new committee, it would have presented unique challenges. So they're a great group of people. I've been to a meeting and also sort of a social catch-up and gotten to know a couple of people on that committee, and I think we have some really good talent and some very smart people who are able to really give us a good insight into what we can do as a council to properly connect people from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and to make a real impact in our city in that respect. So congratulations for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to continuing to be the council representative.
Councillor Bond? Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will. I'm so impressed with how much has been achieved by the Multicultural Advisory Committee in its first year and a bit of existence, and I'm so grateful that that the last council supported the idea and that the community embraced it. Just hearing the extent of the services that were identified for the various communities, multicultural communities in our area that were needed during COVID, that in itself is immense, and the amazing food programs that were set up, because unfortunately there were a lot of people who were left high and dry during COVID, like international students, and it is a real credit to that committee for identifying and making happen translations, food programs, and all of the other various projects that they've undertaken. It's only today, as I was reading these reports to come tonight, also from the Older Persons Consultative Committee, that I realised that councillors have not met so many of the members of these excellent advisory groups. So we have asked officers to organise a get-together for us to meet the exceptional members who give up their time, their expertise and their energy to helping make our policies and our decisions better. And also an opportunity for our various committees to meet each other, because I think there's a whole lot of impressive people on board. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to the great work that you've done, and I look forward to more things being identified. We all have our own perspective, and it is very important to have diversity of perspectives on things that we do so we make a better policy or a better decision. Councillor Baxter, or anyone else like to speak? Councillor Baxter?
Look, I'll just close by again thanking former Councillor Oggy Simic for his work with the committee and in helping to get it established and working with them over last year.
So, councillors, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimously passed. The next item is 9.2, which is the Older Persons Consultative Committee Annual Report 2020. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers about this report? If there are none, we have a recommendation by officers. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Martin. And a seconder? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor and Councillors, it's been my privilege to spend the last 4.5 months as a member of the Older Persons Consultative Committee. It's very nice sometimes to be in a room and not to be the oldest person in the room. There is so much wisdom around the table. I'd like to congratulate all the members. I'd like to congratulate Frieda Ehrlich, who is a former mayor of this municipality, and the many other knowledgeable members of this group. I'm in awe of their understanding, their knowledge, the depth of understanding that they bring to our community and to council is just amazing. I've just noted a couple, if you're just referring to my notes here. University of the Third Age, an initiative of the Older Persons Consultative Committee here in the city of Port Phillip. Our Seniors Festival, hopefully back in business next year. Ageism, as Frieda's talked about, a real issue for those of us who are a little older than the community average, and we've got a group of people who work very, very hard to make council aware and to deal with any issues that arise from ageism. A topic at every meeting is health, safety and our physical environment. We've heard about lighting, but no matter what issue comes up before the council, the Older Persons Consultative Committee will bring its wisdom and knowledge to that, and hopefully I can report back to council on their behalf. And the last thing I'd like to acknowledge them for is the diversity. They represent every single group in this community. I think of all the groups that I sit in, this is the group that probably is most aware of the various different members of our community and tries to look after everyone in this whole community. So it's been an absolute privilege to work with them. I commend their report, and I particularly commend, as Councillor Baxter did when he referred to Councillor Simic's work with the Multicultural Advisory Committee. Councillor Gross had been a member of the Older Persons Consultative Committee for many years, very, very much loved, very, very much missed. Hopefully I can fill his shoes.
Councillor Baxter.
I'll only say that I think the highest compliment I can give to the OPCC is that when I've spoken to councillors from other councils that also have older persons consultative committees or similar committees of older persons, that when I talk about how active and engaged our group are, other councillors say, really, our group, that we barely hear from them, we don't hear from them at all. And I say, well, we hear from ours, definitely. They always have something to say and it's always worth hearing. So that's probably the biggest compliment I can give.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I will really briefly. I was contacted by someone who moved to our municipality, it was probably 2 years ago, and they asked what kind of things were on offer for people of the older generation, and I asked advice from officers, and they came back with so many things that this new resident to our municipality said, oh my goodness, I've come from somewhere and they have nothing like this. And I think that the kind of programs and support and considerations that we have is a direct result of the long advocacy. I didn't realise it was since, was it 2004 that Frida said, has been of the Older Persons Consultative Committee. We are a better municipality because of their advice over this long period of time, and it really hit home when that new resident was just like, my wife and I can't believe there's all these things to do. And that's what making community is all about, hearing what's needed, listening and putting it into action. So thank you very much to all the members and Vale to those that have passed in the last year. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin? All right, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is passed unanimously. Let's move on to 13.1, which is the Palais Theatre ongoing support from April to June 2021. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers on this report? And by the way, thank you, Laura. Sorry, I should have said thank you. No? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would anyone like to move that for me? Councillor Bond and someone to second? I'll second it. Councillor myself. Councillor Crawford. Councillor Bond.
Yeah, just quickly to say, the Palais Theatre is such a great building and such a great icon in St Kilda. It was great to see it refurbished. It's not so great to see it struggling at the moment with its inability to, I guess, put on acts, mainly international acts, which were great to see down there. It was good tonight to drive past and have a look and see the stage being built for the April Sun events, which will be taking place on the St Kilda Triangle beside the Palais Theatre. So, that event will be run by Live Nation, who are the operators of the Palais Theatre. So, good to see them doing something next door to the Palais. It'll be great to see them back up and running. But in the meantime, we need to do what we can as a council to support these businesses and help them get through, and a further rental waiver is only appropriate in this situation.
I also am in support of this support, given how much the entertainment and event industry is still unable to operate as normal, and this COVID normal will continue for a while. I am very heartened to see not just what's happening at the Palais, but there also is another festival, music festival happening in St Kilda on the weekend, which is our Blues Festival, so let's do a little plug for both of them. There is live music happening in our municipality this weekend, which is very exciting. First big time since COVID hit, so get out there and support the various things happening, because this industry will continue to be hard hit, and we'd love to see you all in St Kilda supporting these. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sirikoff.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic month of April for across Port Phillip, when we see the bands across each of the weekends, 5-day weekends for each weekend in the month. This is going to be fantastic to get people out and about and enjoying music. So I hope it's a great success for across from Elwood across to Port Melbourne, that everybody comes along and enjoys 3 great weekends of entertainment.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond. I will put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. 14.1. This is intention to lease part of it of 69 White Street, South Melbourne, and this is reporting submissions in response to the public notice. Councillors, do we have any questions for officers on this report? That's none. So do I have a mover for this recommendation or another? Councillor Baxter? I think it's me. Councillor Crawford. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to this? No? Do I want to speak to it? No, I'm okay on this one. Any other councillor like to speak to this recommendation? Or to the motion? It's the motion now, sorry. Councillor Baxter, to close. All right, councillors, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. 14.2 is the second part of intention to lease for 56 to 78 White Street, South Melbourne. Councillors, do any questions for the officers on this part of the report? Obviously not. Do I have a mover for this or something different? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Bond? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Bond? Anyone else like to speak to the motion? I'm assuming you don't want to close, Councillor Baxter. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 14.3 is the records of informal meetings of council. Councillors, do we have any questions for officers on this report? If not, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Pearl, Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to? No, thanks, Councillor Sirikoff, would you like to speak to it? Would anyone else not in the room, at the councillor's desk like to speak to it? If not, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. So now we're moving on from reports to notices of motion. So councillors, we have 3 notices of motion tonight. So we're going to go with item 15.1, which is a motion raised by Councillor Baxter on the Australian Government intervention in the case of Julian Assange. So I'll just wait till that comes up on the screen. Well, while that's happening, councillors, do we have any questions of the officers in regard to this proposed notice of motion? I have a question, if I may. I'm not sure who I'm directing it to. Given the motion as it is, how long and how much will it take to write a letter, either by myself or the CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there would be minimal cost, just a matter of putting pen to paper to reflect the motion.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Baxter, would you like to move this notice of motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, do I need to read the whole thing? It's quite long.
It is quite a long one, but governance is saying you don't need to. It's on the screen, but I do need a seconder for this notice of motion. Do I have one? I'm happy to second it. Councillor Baxter.
So I'm just speaking to it now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So during the election campaign, a number of councillors were approached by members from within our community and from outside of our community associated with the Assange campaign, asking whether we would support the general advocacy by various organisations, including other local governments, advocating for an intervention by our federal government in Julian Assange's case. I communicated with these advocates, and I'm very happy to be bringing this motion tonight to advocate for the federal government to intervene in this case. Now, I've heard some of the submissions that were made by some members of the public who, had some interaction with this council before, and I'm baffled about the worry about resources spent on this. I feel like the notice of motion is very clear in that there's no budget allocation to this. This is probably not going to cost any more than pen, paper, and I guess an envelope and a stamp to send a letter. Advocacy, in a lot of cases, is quite cheap, but it can be quite powerful, particularly if we join a growing group of other organisations that are advocating for Julian Assange in this case. Now, The case of Julian Assange is a fraught one, I suppose, but Mr Assange is an Australian citizen, and I would expect our federal government to intervene to protect any Australian citizen, whether they be a sinner, a saint, regardless of what their morals are or what they do for a living. That is the point of Australian citizenship, or indeed citizenship of any country, is that your country should have your back and be willing to extend certain rights for you and advocacy for you. So that's what this is about. I note that Mr Assange is in this type of detention for his work as a journalist, and not for any other reason. And that is it's obvious that this is designed to have a chilling effect on people who might seek to embarrass the powerful. And I should note as well that those who have been embarrassed by the work that both Assange and WikiLeaks have engaged in have been on the left, the right. Everyone has at some point fallen afoul of WikiLeaks. That's what they see as their job, and I may agree or disagree with them at different times, but that's what they do, and I think that I think there is an important role there for that. So again, this is about council putting a very small effort to potentially, through joining with a bunch of other organisations and councils and levels of government and federal members of parliament and so on, joining our voice to that and perhaps having a bigger impact that way. So I feel that this is a very, very small investment for potentially a big outcome, and I think we should be taking care of Australian citizens.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I think this is a case of that we can chew gum and walk at the same time. I think we can do all of our advocacy efforts for all of the other things in our community that people care about, but I do know that there are members of our community that care about this issue, very much so. This is not the first approach that many councillors have had on this issue. It's the first time we've brought it to council. I'm a member of the Media and Entertainment Arts Alliance, which includes journalists, and I've been a member since I was 21. And part of that is what's essential to journalists is that freedom of press and speaking truth to power, however uncomfortable or ugly it is. And it is actually a dangerous job where journalists can, and we've seen it in this country ourselves, go to work and possibly get arrested for doing their job, which I would not want for anyone if they were just doing their job, or whatever it may be. It's a very important principle. We all talk about due process, natural justice, wanting free, the right to free speech and all of that. Well, this is all kind of blended in with this. And as Councillor Baxter said, it's a complicated, messy, long drawn-out issue, and I think everyone has varying views on varying aspects of it. But when it comes down to it, I think holding the freedom of the press to actually call out where things need to be called out is actually very essential to the heart of democracy. And being a member of that union and knowing how arts, separate to journalism, can often speak truth to power, and arts has been condemned and over the history of time, I have to stand up and support this motion. I don't know that much about Julian Assange. I just know that he has probably paid a long enough price without a fair trial. And, there are lots of we are seeing every day to day in the world at large, people who are spreading disinformation and telling blatant lies, and there seems to be no punishment for them. And I'd actually prefer punishment on the disinformation side. So I will support this. I'm happy to write the letter as Mayor of the City of Port Phillip at the moment in response to the freedom of rights, both as an equity or an equity member standing up for a fellow person who would be part of my union, and just for the decency of, if it was my brother or uncle or someone who'd been in prison for that long, I would want the Australian government to be advocating on their behalf. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor, I'm inclined to agree with almost everything that Councillor Baxter has said on this issue and that you've also said. I've also wrestled with my conscience as to what I should do as a member of this council, because I'm not sure whether this is the forum for us to formally pass the motion that's currently on the table. As an individual, I'm quite happy to stand up in a public forum and echo all the sentiments that you've both made. I'm quite happy to sign any document in my own right as an individual and listing all the various qualifications for what they're worth, whether that makes any difference. I'm concerned, though, that while I'm a member of this council, if I put my name to this motion, I have a number of other issues that I'm really, really passionate about that probably don't necessarily sit within the City of Port Phillip, and perhaps many other councillors do as well. And if I put my name to this, I'd then probably feel morally bound to bring a number of other issues before the council and plead with you to support them as well. I can't vote against it either. I will abstain, but I would like to go on the public record as saying that from what I can tell, from my uneducated perspective, the behaviour of the American government towards Mr Assange is absolutely disgraceful, and that our federal government needs to do something to get him home. I'm just not sure that this is the right forum for us to advocate on his behalf. I'm quite happy to advocate as an individual, so I will abstain from the motion.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Clark.
This motion reflects another unfortunate example of the misuse of local government process by raising non-related issues by councillors. It's completely disrespectful to the residents of Port Phillip to raise this motion at council that has nothing to do, let me repeat, nothing to do with local government, and recommends that Port Phillip should use its valuable resources, officers' time and residents' funded money for the Mayor or CEO to write a letter to the PM or Foreign Affairs Minister. And while there's been comments around how much does it cost to write a letter, it's a symbolism that we send to our community that their council and councillors are not focused on making their community better and worrying about their issues, which is what we are all elected to do. Particularly in times of COVID, when residents and businesses are facing hardship and financial stress, councillors considering increasing rates, it beggars belief that this motion has been brought to council, wasting our time and misusing residents' funds. I think, as David Blakely eloquently put it this afternoon or this evening, about there are better uses of council's advocacy that could possibly positively impact our community, and that is where our focus needs to be. And as a result, I could not support this motion. Thank you.
I'm just going to take a moment to get governance, if I could, for a moment. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond.
We're elected as councillors to represent the City of Port Phillip. It's worth noting that of all the people that came along tonight to speak in support of this motion, not one of them was a resident of the City of Port Phillip. This motion has nothing to do with the City of Port Phillip. The same motion has been put up word for word, or nearly word for word, to multiple councils across the state by Greens councillors. Recently, this same motion, word for word, failed at the City of Monash when it was put to the vote there. So there's no original thought in this. There's no original reflecting the views of our residents in this motion. Monash voted this down. I urge our council to do likewise and get back to focusing on the issues that are relevant to Port Phillip, such as cleaning our streets and the other items that residents write to us about on a daily basis. Not this. We all have issues we're passionate about. I would love to see the abolition of payroll tax by the state government because it's a tax on employment, and we constantly hear from Councillor Pearl that a job is the number one thing you can do for someone in order to get them back on their feet and get them a bit of dignity and functioning in society. Yet we tax employment. That is disastrous. I would love to sit here and put up notices of motion about abolishing payroll tax, but I don't do it because it's not a City of Port Phillip issue. Every one of us could provide an example like that of a City of Port Phillip issue or non-City of Port Phillip issue that we're passionate about, but we don't do that because we're here representing the City of Port Phillip. I urge my councillors to vote this down and we get back to looking at issues that are relevant to the City of Port Phillip.
Sorry, Jen, you can't speak to the motion. Sorry, Jen. Jen, I'm sorry, you can't speak. Were there any other councillors who would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sirikoff.
The Julian Assange matter is a serious concern for all Australians and should be dealt by the Australian government, which has the resources and means to deal with such an issue at a high level. At a council level, I don't see it belongs in council chambers because it's not a council issue at a local government level. Council and councillors should be focused on the safety and the amenity of what's going on in their own streets. There are people out there who are being treated terribly, who are being attacked, and just over this past fortnight, we've had one of our own council staff who was attacked on the St Kilda Esplanade market and ended up in hospital. I was there last Sunday and there are also unsociable behaviour going on. So we need to look at the safety of the people in our own streets. Also, a female tram driver was attacked on Ackland Street, plus another driver a few days earlier. And in the same time period, a young man was slashed across the face.
You need to define your debate to the motion.
Oh, well, it's talking about safety in our own area
but that's not
and looking after the people.
Julian Assange.
It is talking about Julian Assange.
I'm the chair of this meeting, and please confine your speech to the motion.
Okay, the motion is council should be focused on council issues and not international issues. If anybody is concerned about Julian Assange, I encourage you to speak with our federal member for McNamara, Josh Burns, whose office is at 219 Barclay Street, just around the corner from Ackland Street. Josh Burns has the contacts in federal government to address this matter directly. We don't have that direct contact. I will not be supporting this motion as it is using council resources outside of the role of local government.
Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Pearl.
Thank you very much. And we're in the St Kilda Town Hall, as we know, we have red carpet here, but sometimes I wonder whether or not some people think they're in the Senate as opposed to the Port Phillip Council. Because if you're seeking to prosecute an item such as this, the right place for that is the federal parliament. I didn't call a point of order, but I think under the local laws, this is a line ball call on section 23(4) in terms of saying that the motion is potentially outside the powers of council. And like the Mayor, I know very little about Julian Assange and his plight and his cause, but the little amount I have read tonight and yesterday brings me concerns about why the city, without full briefing about what this person has allegedly committed, particularly in relation to innocent people, that we're signing our name of our city and our 120,000 odd residents to support somebody that hasn't been fully briefed on. And like the Mayor, I know very little about the man, I know very little about the circumstances. I do know that every Australian citizen has rights and the Australian federal government has obligations to support those imprisoned overseas, and I would assume, I haven't researched this, but I would assume that Mr Assange is getting consular assistance and I hope he's taking full advantage of that. But in terms of signing this council's name up to this plight, I don't see that it's within the remit, councillors of the City of Port Phillip, to be doing that. It's the federal government's responsibility, and I encourage all of the councillors here this evening that wish to vote for this motion to, as Councillor Sirikoff said, approach your federal member of parliament or members of parliament. We have 12 senators that represent Victoria and one minister, maybe minister one day, but one member of the House of Representatives that will be adequately able to push the views that you have to support this Australian citizen that's currently imprisoned in the United Kingdom. So I'll be voting against this motion this evening, councillors, and I'd strongly support you also to do so.
Councillors, anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey.
Thanks. I want to thank Councillor Baxter for bringing this motion tonight. I will be supporting the motion. I think it's obviously within Council's role to advocate on issues that are of importance to our community, and I know that this is an issue of importance to members of our community. I've been contacted by many people who are concerned about the plight of Mr Assange, who is subject to politically motivated charges and is currently imprisoned in very grave conditions. So certainly our federal government should be taking steps on behalf of that Australian citizen, and it's well within our rights as a council to write to them and urge them to do so. In terms of the arguments that have been raised about resources, I think that, unfortunately, I think that that's fairly disingenuous line to run. This is about the time that we're spending here this evening talking about the matter, which councillors are fully in control of, and also about the Mayor taking time to send a letter requesting our federal government to fulfil its obligations. So I don't think that those are particularly weighty arguments against. If councillors don't support the cause, then you should just come out and say that. And I want to thank the Mayor for the eloquent speech around the impact that journalism has on our democracy, and how important that is, particularly given this time that we are all living through, and how difficult the job of governing is made when we don't have a reliable, free and fair press. So I will be supporting this motion this evening. I know that it is a relatively small investment of council's time, and that it is a matter that's important to members of our community that we have within our capacity to raise up. So,
Councillor Baxter, would you like to close?
Yes, please. I think, well, I suppose all of the councillors have had their say, and it's disappointing to hear what some of them have had to say. I find it baffling that some councillors would suggest that advocacy to federal government should be something that federal government does. No, the federal government is advocated to. We would be advocating to federal government. To say that this issue is a federal issue is correct. That's why we're advocating to the federal government. We're not saying we would go to the UK and do something about this. We are advocating to the Prime Minister. So this argument that this isn't a local government, of course it's not a local government issue. This motion says that. That's why we're advocating to the people who do have the power to do something. And that's what we do on a regular basis. Councillor Sirikoff raised a number of issues around assaults and those sorts of things, which are police issues. These are state government issues, and yet we communicate with the state government, we communicate with Vic Police, we advocate with regards to all of these sorts of things because it's an area that we do not have control over ourselves, but we think it's important, so we advocate. We do this in a number of different areas. So the argument that we can't advocate to another level of government for something that we think is important is completely disingenuous. The fact is that by being elected to this council, the people have given us a platform, and we can use that platform to try and do the right thing and try to help people. Or we can use that platform to simply say, it's not my business, and I'm going to do the absolute minimum. And what I've noticed from a lot of councillors here is that there are councillors here who clearly haven't read the Local Government Act and aren't interested in whole swathes of responsibilities articulated in there. So to be lectured on what the responsibilities of local government is laughable. Councillor Pearl has talked about, that we should vet people before we stick up for them, before we advocate for their rights as a citizen. That's not...
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
What's the point of order?
Just under the misrepresentation clause, I don't think I ever used the word vet. I didn't say anything.
Okay, so you need to quote, what's the number? Councillor Pearl, before I'll consider it, what's the number?
I can't remember the number, Madam Mayor. If I
Then
could
I
seek
won't-
advice,
no,
may I seek advice from the
no.
CEO on the number of misrepresentations?
So that is part of the process. Please stop speaking. Please resume your
Fair point.
seat.
Ask the...
Councillor Pearl,
Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
if you can't tell me the number, I won't consider the point
I've
of
said
order.
I can't share the number, so if I find one, I'll look it up. But you can continue, please.
So what did he say? I didn't know. Okay, Councillor Baxter.
I'm happy to clarify that I was paraphrasing Councillor Pearl when he said that, but that was clearly the intent of what Councillor Pearl was saying.
Thank you.
Now that I think is again a very chilling and quite scary implication to make, that your citizenship only provides protection for you if those in power decide they feel like it. That is very, very worrying, and that is not something that I would support in any way. Citizens should be entitled to certain protections from their government regardless of their moral stature, what work they're in, what crimes they're accused of, and again, this is Julian Assange has undergone what has been described as torture, that without actually being convicted of the crimes that he's been accused of. This is not something that we can pick and choose favourites about. People are either entitled to their rights or they're not. Councillors, you've heard, we've had relayed to us a message from Julian Assange's father, who has been campaigning for his son's release for a very long time. And all I would urge you to think, as I would think about my children, is that I feel like my children deserve all of the rights that all other people in this world do. They're also Australian citizens, so they deserve those rights too. And that no matter what happened to them, if they fell foul of something like this, I would be fighting for them as well. And I would hope that any of you that have children would feel the same way.
So, councillors, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour?
Can we vote under division, please?
Sure. So, councillors, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Baxter, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Copsey. All those against? Councillor Bonds, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Clark. That motion has failed. Moving on to item 15.2, which is a motion raised by Councillor Copsey on the Rainbow Local Government. Do councillors have any questions of the officers in regard to this proposed notice of motion?
May I ask a couple of questions before moving the motion, if that's all right?
Yes. Can we start with Councillor Copsey, Councillor Baxter? Thank you, Councillor Copsey.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. I just had a couple of questions, and it might be difficult because I do actually intend to move an amended motion. So I might ask a couple of questions now and then a clarifying question once the motion is before us.
Councillor Clark, is there a problem? Can you speak into the microphone? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, are you asking questions on the amended motion or the original motion? Sorry, I'm just confused by the process.
Yes, I do have one question in relation to the amended motion.
Okay, so let's ask that one first.
Should we put that up then?
What have you got up there? Let's start with Katherine, Councillor Copsey's question. Are we putting the motion on the screen, the amended motion? Is this where the confusion is happening?
Through you, Mayor, I think it doesn't matter which motion, but I'll just check with governance. Kirsty, can you just give some advice? These are questions on the topic, correct?
Certainly, through you. Any question on the topic is appropriate.
Great.
In terms of the motion is the motion published in the paper at this point.
Okay, so
I will ask a clarifying question once we're in debate in that case, but in relation to the motion that was published in the papers. I have a query around the process in point 3. The motion reads that creation of an action plan can either be resourced by reallocating current priorities or by bringing in short-term resource to undertake the work. My question is, if the motion is to pass in this format tonight, does that commit council to one course or the other, or would the intention of officers be to come back to council with options around progressing the action plan at a future date through briefings?
Tony Keenan.
Through you, Mayor, if the motion was passed, officers would then look at how we implement that. In relation to that, that would be in my area, so it would involve me looking at the current work plans in relation to diversity and inclusion and whether there could be items that could be deferred or delayed, or whether there's sufficient savings in a budget to bring in a short-term resource, or whether we would have to come back to council to request an additional resource. So that would be the normal process. But based on that, the first thing we would look at is whether it's possible to reallocate current priorities.
Thank you. So any additional costs around that, just to follow up, it would be an intention to check in with council around that?
Through you, Mayor, yes. If there's no budget approved by council, we would have to come back with a request.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for officers? I think Councillor Baxter, you had a question. And then Councillor Pearl, you'll be after that.
I did. Can officers... just as slight background, we had some people talk about what the rainbow ticket process is about, and they talked about it as simply slapping a logo on something. Can officers actually explain what rainbow ticket accreditation involves, how that changes our workforce and the services we provide?
Tony?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, the rainbow ticket, if you just bear with me, I'll open up the document, so I'm going to give you accurate advice. Otherwise But it looks at 5 core standards, some of which we would probably already be meeting, and it's like any quality process that council has a number of quality processes. For example, the childcare services are ISO accredited, our aged care services are accredited to the aged care standards, and so on. So the Rainbow Tick framework looks at these following areas. And of course it's frozen. Organisational capability, workforce development, consumer participation, a welcoming and accessible organisation, processes for disclosure and documentation and record keeping, and culturally safe and acceptable services. The aged care services are already Rainbow Tick accredited, so we've been through those processes so that we can confidently say that all of our aged care services meet all of those standards.
Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if officers can give an update on the to see if there's a better update on the estimated cost of $200,000 in terms of the reference in point 1.1, and if there is, it'd be interesting to hear it. If there isn't, can we get a confidence interval on the $200,000 that's quoted here?
To do that, we'd need to do a fully costed plan to provide detailed advice. The costs involved are the accreditation process, which is working through an accrediting agency, such as QUIP is the main agency that does it. They charge a fee for doing the accreditation process. That's not that large. The main costs would be in delivering of training and in reviewing our policies and procedures and in implementing some new procedures in relation to consumer participation. If this was phased in over time, those costs should be minimised, as we have current resources within people and culture and within my area that has a broad remit on diversity and inclusion, and that would be looking at a reconciliation action plan, at our disability and inclusion plan, at our culturally and linguistically diverse plan, and ensuring accessibility and appropriate services for people of all genders and ages. Some of this stuff will, sorry, that's a very technical term, some of this work will be done through the Gender Equality Action Plan, which we have to implement, so that includes some work around all genders. So I would think that if we can phase this in over time, we could do it. We certainly can't do it at no cost, but we could do much of it within existing resources. The cost that cannot be avoided is the accreditation costs, but they would be a small part. And if we do it over time and phase it out, where you probably looked at what are the services that are community facing firstly, they would be good ones to start with.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Bond.
The cost of that accreditation, do you know what that is?
It varies, Councillor Bond, through you, Mayor, it varies, Councillor Bond, according to the number of programs that are being accredited and the number of staff and the number of work sites. So to give an accurate answer, we have to put in a scoping document and then they will provide us with a quote. My advice would be that we wouldn't do anything like that until we were assured that we were ready to go.
Are there any further questions for the officers? I have one. When you say that, Mr. Keenan, about ready to go, like, is it something that you can do over a number of years, or do you do it in one hit? I guess I'm not sure, like the time frame required to undertake a process like this.
My advice would be it would be done over a number of years. We are already a leader in this field. We're one of 4 councils that has a program accredited to the TIC, that is our aged care. There are only 3 other councils that have an individual program accredited. But if we do this with our aspiration to be a diverse and inclusive council, employer of choice, and servicing the needs of all of our community members, that should be work that's done naturally as we develop our HR policies, as we develop our customer charters, etc. So I think the risk in doing it all at once is you would focus all of the resources to one area, when I think it's better if it's staged and if we identify the areas where you would get best value, and you could do that on an evidence basis. So, for example, the fairly disturbing statistics around youth suicide amongst LGBTIQ, you would probably look at the youth areas being one of the first cabs off the rank.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Baxter.
I have a governance question. Just with regards to how votes are conducted when there are, because we've got 8 councillors in the chamber and 1 absent. In the scenario that we have a tied vote, 4 votes for and 4 votes against, my understanding is that the mayor then has a casting vote. If we had a vote that was 4 votes for, 3 votes against and an abstention, would that change that situation?
Through you, Mayor, yes, the situation does change. In the event that it is a tied vote by virtue of an abstained vote counted as a no vote, in that instance the chair does not have a casting vote.
And can I just clarify then that, so that means that councillors who are opposed to a motion, if they all voted against it, and if the chair was for, if councillors all opposed to a motion, it would get up. But if 3 of them opposed it and 1 abstained, it would fail.
Through you, Mayor, I think the easy way of answering that is for a motion to pass, it must reach majority affirmative of councillors in the room.
Except in the case of a tied vote.
Sorry, so if 8 councillors are in the room, 5 yes votes are required for a motion to pass, regardless of no votes or abstaining.
Yeah. So just to clarify, we have a situation where a minority of councillors can kill a motion by one of them simply abstaining instead of voting against it.
Through you, Mayor, in a circumstance where there is 3 councillors voting no and a councillor abstaining, that motion would be lost.
Yeah. Good to know.
Are there any more questions of the officers? No. So then, Councillor Copsey, would you like to put the motion or an amended motion?
Yes, I would like to put an amended motion, please. If governance can help me by popping that up on the screen. It's an amendment which substitutes text for point 1 of this motion. So points 2 through 5 are identical to what was published in the agenda. There is just a small addition to the first sentence to, if I could get governance to put that up on the screen. The addition is requests the CEO to develop and bring back to council. So it's just after develop, inserting and bring back to council. A costed program of work that would see all council services and programs move to Rainbow Tick accreditation over time. The program of work should identify priority council programs and services for the phased implementation of Rainbow Tick accreditation and the time frame for achievement of accreditation. This program of work should be integrated and aligned with the broader Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan to include all council services and programs, to ensure, all council services and programs are culturally safe and appropriate for First Nations people, people with a disability, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and people of all genders and ages.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. And just before I get cracking, I might also just ask my clarifying question
yes, please do that.
on this. So the clarifying question is, can officers confirm my intent in bringing this motion that council would see the program of work and have an opportunity to respond to that prior to budget commitments and so on being made in point 1?
Through you, Mayor, and I might need governance advice, but my reading of that is where it requests the CEO to develop and bring back to council the costed program. Yes.
So you're correct, Councillor Copsey. We would bring back a costed program for budget approval if there was extra resources required for that program. And for the other parts of your motion, we would include that cost in one report back to you if we required extra budget to implement.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. All right. So I'm really proud to be bringing this motion to council for consideration tonight. I think that this is a really vital area of our work and absolutely essential in terms of walking the talk when it comes to our aspirations around being an inclusive and diverse community. We do need to go beyond, beyond tolerance, and I think start celebrating the incredible diversity that we have in our community. The actions that are laid out in this motion are separate actions that are all within our power and I think very much aligned with the work plan that we are developing as a council as we start getting ready to release our draft council plan in helping us to actually further inclusion for our LGBTI community. I'll just speak quickly to the intention of each of these and then I'll probably leave other comments for closing. The Rainbow Tick accreditation, as officers have pointed out, is actually a very meaningful program. I'm incredibly proud that Port Phillip was a leader in this space. In fact, I believe we were the first council to obtain Rainbow Tick accreditation for our aged care services. That's fantastic. It shows that we have capacity and that we're well positioned to continue that work in this space. And I thank officers for providing the updated information. The information that went out in the agenda version of this motion was from some time ago, and we've obtained better information around what kind of process the officers would be undertaking in order to decide which services we might prioritise first and how much of that we can do in alignment with existing work programs. So I'm really pleased with that amendment and thank officers for helping to provide that updated information. To be quite clear, that was always the intention with this motion. You'll notice even in the copy that went out with the agenda that the commitment was not in this budget year. It was a request to start the process and to understand how long it would take and where we could begin with our program. So it's aligned with what went out originally, and I'll probably speak if we still have concerns about, unknown costs being landed on council. I'll speak to that in closing, but that's not the intent of this motion. There's not a budget implication for financial year 2021 that's determined as a result of this motion. What we're seeking with point 1 is better information from the CEO about what that program would look like. So it's to get a report back, essentially. Number 2 is to establish an LGBTI advisory committee. We've heard from 2 of our fantastic advisory committees this evening on the amazing perspectives that they help bring to our work as a council. I think that this is a bit of a gap for a city that prides itself and is already so active, I should say, in this space, but I think we can always do better. The advisory committee, the main resource required for that is officer and councillor time. We'll get valuable information from active and engaged members of our community that will help inform our work and make our work more representative of everybody in the community that we serve through point 2. Point 3 is around, it's again a delayed action, but sets out an intention to look at the development of an LGBTI action plan with input from the advisory committee, as is proper. So thanks to the officers again for the clarification around potential funding sources for that, but also when that might occur. And then 4 is one that I'd be really pleased to see. We already have a great tradition in the city of Port Phillip of flying the rainbow flag during the entire period of Midsummer and up to Pride March. And so point 4 retains that protocol, which is in our existing flag protocol. So it doesn't change that situation, but then also looks at flying appropriate flags from our community flagpole on LGBTI days, awareness days, in accordance with the existing community flagpole guidelines. So that's why there are 2 processes there, because I think the protocol around the rainbow flag predates when we had community flagpole guidelines. And number 5, in some versions of the Rainbow Votes pledge that's gone to other councils, it's a big step for councillors and officers to participate in the Pride March. I congratulate those councils who are taking that step, but I note that we have a fantastic tradition in the city of Port Phillip of having all councillors at the head of that Pride March with the banner. It's one that will proudly continue, and it also notes our ongoing support for Midsummer through grants and in-kind support. That is the motion, and I will probably leave other comments for close. I hope it clarifies some of the things that have been raised in discussion and debate earlier this evening.
Councillor Baxter.
Can I please reserve my right?
I don't think you can.
Just give us a moment for governance, whether that's possible. I don't think that's possible, Councillor Baxter. You'll have to speak now.
No problem.
Thank you.
So yes, I'll be supporting this motion. I think that honestly, I think that obtaining Rainbow Tick accreditation across all council-run services should be something we should have been aiming for anyway. And I thank Councillor Copsey for bringing this motion before us. Council runs a number of different services, from aged care through to youth services and childcare and you name it. We're in many different businesses, and all of those, or most of those, interact directly with the community. Our community, which is diverse and includes people from lots of different backgrounds, including people who are LGBTIQA+, or they may call themselves queer, or they may call themselves really whatever label that they feel comfortable with. This community has always been very strong in the city of Port Phillip, and we have been proud of that. And I use the word proud deliberately because Pride March is such a fixture in this city and something that people know this city for. So when we interact as a council with that community, we should be equipped with the tools and the training and the knowledge to do so in a way that is accepting and understanding and properly assists those people. I'll give an example. Young LGBTIQA+ people are at very high risk of self-harm, suicide and other types of harm, including violence from other people. They're a very high risk of depression and other mental illnesses, and it's not because they happen to be queer, it's because of the way society interacts with these people. So if our youth services are not properly trained in how to work with a young person who is in this position, it could be a young trans person, for example, there could be negative effects out there in the community because of our inability to properly deal with our community. Now, if you happen to live in some sort of magical municipality which didn't have a single gay person in it, of course, nothing like that exists. But if you happen to do that, you could say, okay, we don't need to do this. But the fact is, this is our community, and we need to make sure that our services are properly equipped and trained to deal with our community in a respectful way that minimises harm and maximises inclusion and involvement. So to that, I outlined a scenario, a voting scenario earlier that may happen. All councillors are aware of that. All councillors know that if we have 4 votes in favour and 3 votes against, and somebody decides to abstain, then we would be using a little loophole in our governance rules for only 4 councillors, a minority, to kill a motion. So we're all aware of that. So if that does happen tonight, we will know it will have been deliberate, a deliberate dirty trick to do so. So I hope that that doesn't happen. I hope that if you oppose this motion, you vote against it. If you support it, you support it. And try not to strategically abstain in order to gain some sort of advantage through a technicality. Because, as I said, there are young people out there who are at risk that we need to be taking care of. And for us to throw away this opportunity for us to investigate a better way to do so is absolutely irresponsible and completely at odds with our duty as a council.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor and councillors, you heard me speak about half an hour ago in this chamber when I said that there was an issue that I held passionately but that I wasn't sure was an appropriate issue to be debated in the chamber. This is an issue that I hold very, very passionately, and it's an issue that concerns all of us in this chamber. It concerns everyone in the city of Port Phillip. And can I speak from my personal experiences? As a local person in what's now the City of Port Phillip. I attended an unnamed Catholic boys' school in the City of Port Phillip where the other young men at the boys' school decided that they didn't seem to see me having the same sort of gender identity as the rest of them, and my 4 years at that school were absolute hell, and there were no services available in those days. There was a park next door to that school, and men who walked that park ran the risk of being beaten, set alight, pushed onto the railway tracks nearby. We won't mention where it is. And this is 50 years ago. We've come an awful long way in the City of Port Phillip, but there's still a long way to go. I've been a school principal for 20 years. I've just retired, and I've dealt with young people struggling with sexual identity. I've dealt with same-sex families struggling with issues. I've dealt with all sorts of prejudices that there are still members of our community who have all sorts of strange prejudices to people who they see as being different. And based on my own memories of my own childhood and my own background at school, very, very concerning as a school principal to try and help these people. And it's really, really important that the council is probably the first place that they can turn to for support. And if we aren't able to support them, then we're letting these people down. We're letting our whole community down. Now, I know there were concerns that the motion in its original form had a monetary figure attached. A lot of work has been done, and I thank Councillor Copsey and her team for working with the council office to come up with a motion which makes it very, very clear that we're not committing any money in this room at the moment. What we're doing is we're making a commitment to make sure that the issues that I felt that I faced as a school kid here in this municipality, that the issues that many of the families that I've seen in my role as a principal, watch the issues that these families dealt with, we have the support in the City of Port Phillip to make sure that we can address all of this. We don't do a bad job. We do a pretty good job at the moment. We do a bloody good job. However, there may be things that we've missed, and Councillor Copsey's motion is going to make sure that if there are any ticks that have been accidentally missed, we're going to pick up on those ticks, and we're going to make sure that the City of Port Phillip is a better place for what we vote for this evening in the chamber.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't be supporting this as there's too many uncosted commitments involved, even in the revised motion. No one can ever accuse this council of not doing its utmost for the LGBTI community, but like all items, this council needs to, or this council considers, we need to do so with the knowledge and the costs and the resources that are required. I would encourage Councillor Copsey to come back with a request for costs with a view to a decision being made down the track by Council with the full knowledge of what it is that we're voting for and the financial implications on this city of what that would cost, and for Councillor Copsey to work with all her fellow councillors on that particular motion, and she may very well find that that would get unanimous support in this room if it was done, if that approach was taken.
Would any other councillor? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Copsey, for putting the motion. In some respects, in the original motion, you put you're a bit damned if you do, damned if you don't in terms of the money. I know there's been situations where we haven't put the money there and we've been criticising for not costing things and bringing things up. You've done the right thing by putting a dollar sum there, and that got some publicity today that I got to see. So, all kudos to you for trying to estimate something that you knew was going to come up. But in this case, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think the right place for this is the council plan, and particularly where we are based at the moment in terms of a budget bit under the council plan. And the reason I say that is these sorts of initiatives need to compete with other initiatives in the council as opposed to being viewed mutually exclusively. You would all know one of the things I'm very passionate about is child maternal health care and immunisation. And I'm still gutted to learn that the $25,000 a year that the City of Port Phillip provides the Caring Mums program is being axed, but that's the reality of the council plan situation. This type of initiative needs to compete with that type of initiatives and the other factors in the council plan. Now, as council goes on and priorities change and the world changes, such as last year COVID came and we had to change our priorities, and everybody's well within their rights to put a notice of motion up to change those priorities, big and small. But at the moment, I think the appropriate place for this sort of thing is within the council plan process to compete for it. I won't be supporting the motion here this evening. And just to some points in terms of what others have said about the voting procedure here this evening, everybody has the right to vote. In fact, they have an obligation under the Local Government Act to vote in accordance with the best way they see fit. And to Councillor Baxter's point about a minority of people bringing down a motion, under the circumstances you're talking about on a 4-4 vote, a minority of councillors would be voting in a situation, albeit done under the majority auspices of the chair. So I think, and also under section 53(3) of the meeting procedures, it clearly states that for the purposes of determining the result of a vote, a councillor present that abstains from a vote is taken to voted against the question. So everybody has the right and obligation to vote the best way they see fit, and nobody should be unduly influenced about trying to vote a certain way, or nobody in this chamber should be questioned about why they're voting a certain way. We all have an obligation under the Local Government Act and under our meeting procedures. I take that very seriously, and I know my fellow councillors do also. So, Councillor Copsey, thank you for taking the time for bringing the motion, and thank you for your original motion for putting a dollar value in there. I appreciate that, and I have full respect for it. But I think we should put this in the council plan, and I look forward to having those conversations if we can still find the time to do that. But I'm not going to support your motion here this evening. Thank you.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Clark.
I think it's fair to say that Port Phillip Council is a council that could be or should be congratulated for its support of the LGBTQIA+ community over many years, and some recent examples that were mentioned in the motion are the gifting of the land for the Pride Centre on Fitzroy Street, the painting of the rainbow on the road for $28,000, and long-time sponsor of and supporter of participant in the Pride March and the Midsummer festivals. As the recommendation makes clear, we provide $115,000 support annually for those events, and I'm personally supportive of that. I'm supportive of the community and also a community that we represent that welcomes the LGBTQIA+ community, and as a council, I know we're all very supportive with policies that ensure we are inclusive and welcoming and supporting of diversity as a council and a community. So I appreciate the intent of Councillor Copsey's motion. However, I don't think the motion at this time I can support. We are already a leader in the diversity, inclusion and supporting the community. We are working towards all of these or some of these, as Tony mentioned, and when I consider this in light of the tough conversations we're having in relation to budget and other competing priorities, I don't think I can support this motion tonight. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sirikov.
When we became councillors, we all underwent numerous induction training sessions in many areas, including gender equality, diversity and inclusiveness. And I expect that all council staff receive the same training. We welcome and respect all members of the LGBTQI community. I also know that the City of Port Phillip is an equal opportunity employee and does not discriminate based on gender or sexuality. It is illegal to do otherwise. Discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity or expression is prohibited in every state and territory with concurrent federal protections. Standards we already are meeting in this council. We can be proud that the City of Port Phillip was able to secure the location of the Pride Centre and have gifted the LGBTQI community land worth more than $13 million in which the Pride Centre stands, plus other financial support. We can also be proud of that the City of Port Phillip is a major sponsor of the Midsummer Festival and flying flags. These are commendable opportunities that the council has met. By doing so, the Port Phillip Council has established its rainbow credentials, and we happily embrace our rainbow community and we comply with the laws. This afternoon, there was discussion amongst the councillors about changes with this motion. And for me, it's required more clarity of what this means. It no longer included what the costings would be, and I know that Councillor Copsey has spoken to that tonight, but I feel that I really need more time and clarification and information on how this is going to affect the budget, whether it's for next year or the following year. Over the past few months, councillors have spent many hours at workshops to discuss the next budget plan, and in the plan it was also whether to increase rates or not. Mentions of this accreditation was not mentioned in these workshops, nor where the funding was going to come from. So I find it difficult to know exactly how much this accreditation will cost. I tend to find it more of a tick of approval for the council at the moment, rather than delivering a service to the whole of the community. And so I'm just very hesitant until I've got more information of how much it's going to be costing in the budget plan, that I won't be supporting this motion. But thank you for bringing it forward, and I look forward to hearing more about it.
Can I ask a clarifying question? If we don't pass this motion and the report is not done, will we be able to find out the kind of costs involved, or will it require a report to get to that information anyway? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm just not clear. Like, if we don't do the work to just figure out what we need to do, will we be able to give it a budget?
Through you, Mayor, I think if this motion fails, clearly we won't be able to do the work as requested in there, but you could make a separate request for us to do work. CEO?
I'll just clarify. If this motion fails, we won't do the work requested in the motion, but as with all other budget and plan requests, if the majority of councillors asked us to do a costing on it as part of a plan, your draft plan and budget, then we would do that.
I will speak to the motion. This motion makes me want to cry and also celebrate. And I'm really, I have lots to say, and I'll try and say it quickly. 8 of 9 of us signed this pledge as part of our election campaigns, and I know the reality is when you get on council, it's not always possible. But this motion is about seeing what is possible to be done in regard to the pledge we made to our wider community in this space. So I am very supportive of at least getting to the idea of what would need to happen over this term and how we could achieve it. I want to note that I don't think our community comes to us if there's not a need for these things. If they felt that all of our services or how the community sees them and how they interact in the world was perfect or not in need of improvement, they wouldn't come to us. They wouldn't have run a campaign across all councils to do better, to look at where we can be better. I think inclusion is not a one-off cost. It's not a one-off policy or motion. It's an ongoing improvement as human beings in our hearts, and as the organisations in the world. We have to be more inclusive, and that's an ongoing process. You don't just get it right and then you're done. And what I laugh that I love when coincidences happen or things, the universe aligns. So tonight we heard from 2 of our amazing advisory communities. one very new and one long-standing. And we got to see the huge contribution that some of the things they said tonight wouldn't have occurred to me, wouldn't have made my decision-making better. And that's the same with the LGBTIQ community. Yes, there's many of them in our community, and we have led the way previously. Are we still leading the way in many of our practices? I don't know. I imagine maybe we're not leading the way, but there's definitely always room for improvement in any organisation, in all of us in our individual lives. So I think that having heard from our amazing committees, that there's a really big gap in the kind of information, important information that we as councillors need to make better decisions for our wider community. And we do have an obligation under the Health and Safety Act, or Health and Wellbeing Act, sorry, to look after our wider communities. So that does require us to look in all corners. It's not just the obvious ones, perhaps. You know, one of the things that why do people live here? There's so many reasons, but I tell you what, one of the big ones is the inclusiveness and the kind of community we've become over the years because of our inclusiveness of all ethnicities, of all sexualities, of all religions. And that's not luck, that's a lot of hard work by residents and advocacy by residents over time, and on the part of the council investing into our community, ensuring the ways our practices, our policies, our programs, our support is inclusive, does provide for the people that we represent. And then people move here and expect those things. We value them. That's why people move to the municipality. We've got so much going on in this municipality that is so wonderful. But that requires council to keep improving that, including all of our residents. And yes, this is the bit I want to celebrate. On the back of councils before us that decided to help fund Pride centres, Pride March, make it a safe, inclusive space, we get that added wonderfulness to our community, and we are hopefully very soon opening the Pride Centre, the only one in Australia, because our municipality has been recognised as so inclusive. And you know, there's going to be so many keen residents to join our advisory panel if we were to commit to developing one. But I hope I can be proud and say to them that we are going to undertake the Rainbow Tick accreditation program, because it's going to be pretty hard to say to our community, yeah, we know we made the pledge and we're here to open the Pride Centre, but we just, you know, we didn't think it was important enough. We didn't think it was important enough to get a report to find out what we needed to do over a period of time and how much it costs. We didn't think it was important enough. I don't want to be that person standing there. We are all better when we listen to others, look at the fights that are happening for women representation in Parliament, wherever it may be. They're not standing up and fighting that hard for no good reason. So they reached out to all of us. We signed a pledge, and I don't remember signing a pledge that said only if it costs nothing. This is a time to stand up and counter for what you said you valued and what our community highly values. And I want to be part of a council that continues to do this work. We're not committing to any financial costs right now. We're just asking officers to bring back what that could look like. And we have obligations to our community. And you know what? I want to be proud when I'm at that Pride Centre opening soon, not embarrassed because we couldn't even get a report. So I ask people who've spoken tonight to reconsider your vote in support of this motion, which is simply looking at the pathway forward to how we can make a more inclusive and safer society for particular parts of our community. Councillor Copsey, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. And it will probably be obvious to those watching, actually this motion has made me cry tonight. Try to keep it together, but I really am a little bit at my wit's end in terms of this motion. I have really tried very clearly to respond to some of the concerns that have been raised by my colleagues in this chamber around cost. And I'm not sure why that's not getting through. The way that I've crafted this motion was specifically designed with those concerns in mind. It is to get the costing that is being requested and to understand how much that will cost so we can determine to go forward or, what to go forward with. I imagine, as it does with other briefings, it will come back to us with a range of options and, I trust our officers to work with council to implement council's will as they always do. It just comes down to looking at the motion as it's before you and understanding that the intent of it is to seek your further input and is to seek your direction on how we progress these items going forward. But what I'm hoping we can do tonight is at least start the journey. And I don't think it's too much to ask for members of our community for whom these services and these actions can be so meaningful. It makes a really big difference for members of our community to not only know that we've stuck a rainbow sticker on the door of our aged care services, but that if they determine to go there, they're going to be embraced for who they fully are. They're not going to face stigma, which some of them might have faced throughout their lives. And as Councillor Martin said, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. There is more work to do. We can't rest on our laurels here in Port Phillip and just assume that everything's going to keep getting better. Things have gotten better because past councils have made the decision to do the hard policy work, to do the hard work of learning how to better service our community. Oh, excuse me, sorry. So I have to express my frustration that despite Councillor Bond trying to respond to these barriers that have been thrown up to supporting this motion, it hasn't seemed to get through. And all I can say is if you look at this motion tonight, I'm giving councillors every opportunity to understand the scope of work and the cost. We're going to, there's really only the three of them that actually involve any extra cost at all, and with those first 3 points we're going to get more information as a council on how we progress that. So look, please just don't fall back on that. If you don't think that this is important, I don't know really if I can change your mind, but I've tried very hard to accommodate some of those concerns, and I think that actually I've got there with this motion as it sits. So please don't hide behind that, I guess, is what I would say. The other thing I wanted to say tonight was to thank Rainbow Local Government for the incredible work that they are doing. Councils have fantastic ability to influence in this space and to make good policy, and we're already seeing across Victoria that more and more councils are undertaking this process of Rainbow Tick accreditation. Again, it's not happening just out of nowhere. It's happening because people in the community care enough to advocate about it and are dedicating their time to advocacy on these issues and are coming to councillors and to candidates and people who put their hand up for council and saying, please, this is important to me. Will you undertake this work if you get elected? That's why I'm bringing this motion, because I said that I would commit to this. So if you engaged with this pledge, I would ask you to follow through on that commitment. And even if you didn't, this is great work that we can do. So thank you to Rainbow Local Government and the other advocacy groups and just, people who are out there pushing to reduce stigma and make life easier for LGBTIQA plus people who are coming up through their lives than it has been in the past. it really does make a difference what we do in this chamber, and what I hope is that we can start recognising that for especially some of the services that have been highlighted as ones that we might potentially see come back in this report as high priorities to start. Family, youth and children, I think, is an area where we can't underestimate the importance of increasing acceptance, and not just acceptance and tolerance. I want to move beyond that and have us be a place where people find in our services as a council a place where they're celebrated and really valued for what they bring to our community. The accreditation involves training programs, and it's an ongoing improvement program. It's not just some tick and forget and put an award on a shelf. It will have real impacts for people who are accessing council services, life-changing, and I dare say in some cases life-saving impacts. So please support us just getting a report in order to see how we can progress that. I think that's not an unreasonable thing for members of our community to expect. I don't think I've got anything more to say. I'm just hoping that we'll be a council that makes a commitment to our community to take this sort of action forward.
So, councillors, I'm going to put that motion to the vote.
Can we
All
vote
those
under
in
division,
favour?
please?
Sorry?
Can we vote under division?
Sure. All those in favour? Councillor Baxter, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Copsey, Councillor Martin. All those against? Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Clark. That motion fails. We've got to move on to motion 15.3, which is a motion I and Councillor Crawford have raised on an extension of the temporary closure of Cecil Street, South Melbourne. Do councillors have any questions of the officers in regards to this proposed notice of motion? No questions? If not, I will move this notice of motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl. Oh, we're going to put it on the screen? Do I need to read it all out, or is there an adjustment? Oh, there is a slide, sorry. I do want to delete that point 3. It is only an extension to the Wednesday, the 21st of April.
Happy to second that.
And Councillor Pearl's happy to second it. This is a little motion, as compared to the other ones tonight, that is about allowing this traders and the South Melbourne market community and the community around it to enjoy the outdoor extensions and parklets for a little bit longer. I think when we first planned for when it would be, possibly didn't take into consideration the timing of Easter and the school holidays. So this is simply a motion to extend that for those time periods to allow traders and the market to benefit, and also the kids and families out and about, so they've got somewhere to sit and enjoy the market. It's quite simply that. So I would urge my fellow councillors to support this for another couple of weeks. Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I have the privilege to represent you councillors on the South Melbourne Market Committee, which I dearly love doing. The Cecil Street closure has been a huge success once it's been put into place. It was a fairly expensive exercise funded by ratepayers to support the market and visitation to the market, and it's been by all regards a fairly large success, and particularly for the small number of businesses on Cecil Street that were able to extend their outdoor dining area onto the bike path there, that they've seen instant results, and those of you that have driven past would have seen a substantial number of people in the outdoor seating areas for those restaurants, but also on the fairly primitive seating that's been erected by the City of Port Phillip up the other end. So it's been a huge success. It's met its purpose. The purpose of this extension is to ensure that the Easter period was covered, which it has been, and the school holiday period is covered. So we've invested the money to put this there already. It's a sunk cost. Extending it a few weeks I don't think really hurts anybody, and given the current reduced attendance, albeit increasing attendance to the market compared to where we were at the peak 18 months ago, I don't think the traffic considerations or concerns for the small number of days remaining for it to stay are a big concern for council. So let's just extend this by a few weeks to assist the traders without any huge traffic impost that's greater than what's already there. So I hope you councillors can support it.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is passed. Reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do we have any reports from councillor delegates tonight? Councillor Baxter.
I'll be very quick. This will be my last report as President of the Association of Bayside Municipalities, a position I hold by virtue of being Council's delegate on the ABM. We have a new group of councillors as delegates of the ABM, and I believe 7 out of the 10 are brand new to council as well, so have jumped right through the ring of fire. But it is a really great group that we caught up recently in a sort of getting to know you and information session with representatives from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, as well as Parks Victoria, Lifesaving Victoria and other agencies. And it is a real testament to the standing that the ABM has, that all of those departments sent nobody at a lower level than director level to come down and speak and engage with these councils. So the ABM continues to be one of the City of Port Phillip's best avenues to engage with the state government on issues about Port Phillip Bay and our coast. And I'm very proud of my 2 years as president and what we've been able to achieve in terms of our work with the state government, in terms of getting a Port Phillip Bay coastal hazard assessment plan, in terms of getting proper guidelines for councils to help develop their coastal planning, and also in helping to redevelop the charter and how the organisation works. So. That's all for me, and I'll be happily handing over the presidency to someone else next Wednesday. But I'll continue to represent this council on the ABM, and we'll continue to get value out of that very powerful organisation.
Any other reports by councillor delegates? If not, we'll move on to item 17, which is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? Then 18, which is confidential matters. Councillors, we have no confidential items tonight, so there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.